I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest, Ola Obadina. Ola is a first-class graduate in global business from Trinity College Dublin and a recipient of both the J.P. Magnus and the Laidlaw Leadership Scholarship. Growing up in Kerry to Nigerian parents, Ola brings both personal insight and academic rigor to a conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her research has focused on strengthening gender and ethnic diversity in corporate leadership, and we'll be talking about the value of EDI and whether or not it needs to be reformed. Thank you very much, and we'll have a great podcast. Hi, and welcome to the show. So today we're with Ola Obadina. Ola, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we're going to be talking about you, Ola. You're a former Trinity student, and you have a very interesting background that we'd like to talk about. We're going to also use your expertise and your own experience to talk about the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, a topic that is of great interest to many of our listeners, but a topic that is also has come under a lot of scrutiny and, let's say, controversy and challenges over the last couple of years. So we'll try to talk about those this topic in particular, and the challenges that it faces in the most open manner. But first of all, Ola, I'm delighted to have you here. So I don't know that much about you, and I'm sure our listeners may know even less. You're from Kerry, and I believe your parents are for Nigerian origin. Can you tell us a little bit more about you, how you grew up in Kerry, and how you eventually ended up in Trinity?
Yes, of course, I'd be happy to. So my name is Ola, as you've said, and I am the firstborn daughter of Nigerian immigrants to Ireland. And we grew up in Kerry. We grew up in Tralee. I don't know if you know the Rose of Tralee, but that's my town. And to be honest, I had a very good upbringing. However, I do feel that my race and my background did play a significant role in my experience when I was younger, and that has really informed what I want to do with my career, and it's really informed the reason why I came to Trinity as well, which we'll probably get into. When I was younger, my parents would always try and instill in me that my blackness, my Nigerianness is something to be proud of, and it's not something to be ashamed of, because I think naturally as an immigrant child, you do notice your difference. You know, when you're in a classroom and you're the only person who looks like you in that classroom, you do immediately maybe feel like singled out, or you feel just visibly different to everybody else. Some people can take that as a positive, and some people can take that as a negative. And I do think being very young, my default was negative. However, with my parents constantly telling me that your difference is something to be valued, you know. A lot of people will try and do a lot of different things to stand out, but you just being in the room alone and you haven't even said anything, you do stand out. And so I've decided to frame that as a positive. And with applying to Trinity, that is something as well that I really valued and I really tried to express as well. So I went through secondary school and grew up in
Tralee as well?
In Tralee, yes. And I had quite a good secondary school experience, but I was, again, one of the ethnic minority groups in my school for the 7 years. And in terms of colleges...
So what, so you grew up in the early 2000s, was it? Or?
Yeah, in early 2000s.
And so, in a school like this in Tralee,
Or late 2000s, actually.
Late, sorry. So how many, black people would be in the school? How many people of a similar background or origin? And
yeah, so in my class specifically, I think there was around 4 of us.
Okay.
And my class was one of the most diverse classes, to be honest. We used to joke that they kind of put all the multicultural people in one class, because there was a lot of people from India as well in my class, Bangladesh and Germany as well. So we used to joke a little bit about that, just because we actually did notice in the other classes there was not many multicultural people. In hindsight, I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but yeah, so
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
yeah.
obviously, yeah, as you say, a minority.
Yes.
Yeah.
And kind of growing up in Kerry, the natural, let's say, progression for people is usually to go to university in Cork or Limerick or Galway, just because they're a lot closer, firstly, and they're a little bit closer to the culture in Kerry, which is very rural, very kind of localized, very small. Whereas not a lot of people actually move to Dublin for college. So to be honest, it wasn't until my very final 5 months of secondary school that I made the decision that I do want to come to Dublin. I kind of fell into a bit of groupthink, just kind of wanting to go with the crowd and saying, okay, I'm going to stay close to home. However, I did feel that the biggest opportunities would be for me if I moved into Dublin. And also I had some conversations with people who had graduated from Trinity, and they really talked a lot about the network that you build in Trinity. If you want to work in multinational companies, that Trinity really is the university you should go to. And so that was when I kind of set my mind on Trinity. And the person I was speaking to also happened to be Nigerian and also happened to have grown up in Kerry. So for me, that was just incredible to see like how much he grew as a person, coming from exactly the same background that I did. And he was working in Deloitte as a consultant. And that just really showed me that it's possible for me, regardless of what I look like or what gender I am.
Okay.
And so I set my sights on Trinity.
Very good. And you're part of the Trinity, or you were part of the Trinity Access program. Can you tell us a bit about your experience at Trinity and about the Trinity Access program from your perspective in a few words?
Yeah, so the Trinity Access program is a program that I entered university through, and it was honestly so impactful to me personally. One of the biggest things is that they really emphasize that people who are coming from maybe lower socioeconomic backgrounds or from rural backgrounds, or if you're the first person in your family to go to college, that you still have a place here in Trinity. And that place starts through TAP, but eventually you just, become exactly like the rest of the cohort in Trinity. So they did, validate the fact that we do come from different places, but they never made us feel singled out within Trinity. So before I actually entered university, they did a course. It was like a 3-day course just about how Trinity works, about the different services, about the career opportunities you can get from Trinity. Even they did a campus tour that was virtual, so if you couldn't make it, you could actually just watch it from online. And the biggest thing as well was that we got to also meet other people that were also on the program. And that was great for me because I was the only person who, from secondary school, came to Trinity, to my knowledge. And so I didn't have any friends, I didn't have any network, I didn't have anyone at all that I knew in Dublin, let alone Trinity, aside from the Nigerian guy that I spoke to. And so getting to see other people who were also from Kerry that were actually going to be moving to Trinity was it really comforted me to know that I'm not alone. And then another thing they were really great for is kind of scholarships and financial aid. So Trinity Access, they really have a lot of opportunities for students to get scholarships, maybe in research or maybe in academics, and to really push yourself outside of just your regular modules you do day to day. So I took advantage of that, and I was able to land a scholarship in my first year, which really helped me throughout the 4 years of college. And it was really amazing because it helped me do Erasmus as well. So I ended up moving to Paris for a year, got to study there, which again informed my mindset about diversity. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have the scholarship from TAP, and I wouldn't have had the scholarship from TAP if I didn't engage in the program in the beginning.
Very good. Then when you were here, and we're going to get to the topic that interests us today then, which is, like you've already mentioned it in a few times in your conversation, the topic of diversity, equity and inclusion. So your own dissertation as an undergrad here was dealing with entrepreneurship from minority ethnic group. So can you tell us a little bit about your dissertation and your finding, and then we'll broader the conversation around DEI in general?
Yeah, of course. So my dissertation was about ethnic minority entrepreneurship, as you said. And the reason why I picked the topic is because I really wanted to highlight that there are so many different types of entrepreneurs. I know that sounds very basic, but when you get into the deep levels of that, you really understand that there's a lot of kind of systemic issues within Ireland, and a lot of opportunities that we do have for entrepreneurs in Ireland, but maybe some of them don't actually cater towards certain groups of entrepreneurs. Maybe access to those opportunities is difficult for certain entrepreneurs. And so I really wanted to tackle that issue. And also coming from an ethnic minority group, it's just a very personal topic to me. And as someone who eventually wants to inspire into entrepreneurship, I thought this would be a great idea for me to do, so I could actually research about the ecosystem in Ireland and see maybe what kind of challenges might I face or what opportunities are there for me as a Black woman who was going to go into entrepreneurship. So I ended up researching the ecosystem in Ireland. So I looked at policies, I looked at financing and access to finance, I looked at the market development, I looked at the culture surrounding entrepreneurship in Ireland, I looked at human capital and kind of skill development, and kind of a lot of theoretical frameworks as well, and put them together in order to create my research project. And I also got to speak to 9 entrepreneurs that were from a range of different ethnic minority groups in Ireland. Some from Asian backgrounds, some from African American, some from Nigerian Irish, some from Indian backgrounds, and more. And really just talk about their experiences, talk about their challenges. And some of the findings that I came across were really, really interesting and very niche as well. So, for example, if we take finance, a big barrier actually towards scaling startups was access to finance. And this is natural, even if you're not from an ethnic minority group. This is something that almost every entrepreneur will face. However, I found that the level to which you experience this is greater for ethnic minority groups, because sometimes there's really strict requirements for accessing loans from banks. And sometimes when you have an ethnic minority target market, so your product is specifically for minority groups, it's seen as higher risk because those communities are smaller in Ireland, and so it's more difficult to actually obtain loans. So a lot of ethnic minority entrepreneurs will rely on personal finance or family and friend funding, but that only takes you so far. You know, as a startup, eventually after you do your seed round with family and friends, you want to get into venture capital so you can actually scale the business. But then I decided to look into venture capital and interview people who were actually working in those funds, and I found that there were some misalignments. So, for example, when some of the entrepreneurs were pitching to these VCs, the VCs did not necessarily understand the problem. And if anyone is in business, you know that the most significant or important thing is for the VC to understand that this is a very real problem that needs to be solved. Because sometimes the entrepreneurs would be solving problems that are specific to ethnic minority communities. And if the funders who are sitting at the table are not from those communities, they don't actually see that as a salient issue or an important issue. And so they don't think it's a viable business, they don't think that it's worth investing into. And that really undermines people's confidence as well in their business ideas. And so, I started speaking more about the issue and kind of came across potential solutions to this problem, because I really wanted to figure out how can we get these minority businesses to scale. You know, if we want to even just have more social cohesion in Ireland, I think that minority businesses are a great way to do that. So how can we actually get them to get VC funding? And one of the ideas that I came up with in my conversations was to actually expand existing funds that are in the UK that are already focused on minority businesses into Ireland. So I think this would be quite a strong solution or idea to implement, because we would be promoting kind of intercultural and, let's say, transnational. I don't want to use too much jargon, but between countries, we'd be promoting collaboration between countries. And I think we'd be able to leverage the UK's networks and resources in Ireland as a starting point until we kind of build up the ethnic minority business community and economy, and then we can start having our own VC funds. And when I presented this to VCs, they did say that that was actually quite a useful idea. And
Your question, because when you started to introduce yourself, you mentioned the fact that there was very few people from a multicultural background in your class in Kerry, and you could have said like a multi-ethnic background, but you chose to use the word multicultural. Can you explain that to me? A lot of the issue that you have mentioned before in passing had to do with the color of your skin, which is different than the culture. So I'm intrigued by the fact that you use that terminology of multicultural. Can you explain that to me?
Yes. So when I was growing up in my classes, there was racial diversity. So let's say in terms of skin color, there was people from a range of different backgrounds. But for me, I'm a Black woman, but I'm Irish Nigerian. So I have like a multicultural identity. So in terms of my Nigerianness, that comes a lot from my parents. I was never born in Nigeria, and to be honest, I mostly identified as Irish up until I actually visited Nigeria when I was like 16 years old. So I really grew up believing more so in my Irish identity, and growing up, with Irish culture, Irish music, having mostly Irish friends, spending time at their homes and really just seeing.
Yeah, well, you say like you were born in Ireland, and you the first time you went to Nigeria was when you were 16.
Exactly.
So obviously, you're Irish. Yeah,
exactly.
But yeah, you're in that bus.
Exactly. But then I visited Nigeria, and really that struck a big kind of chord within me. Like I really realized like I am both Irish and Nigerian. Getting to visit all my family members back home, getting to eat foods that I don't have access to in Ireland, but obviously we have access to there, really just showed me that I do have this kind of dual identity, and I want to be able to leverage that in my academics. I want to be able to leverage it in my personal life. I want to be able to leverage that in my career, because it is an asset. And I think this is the story for a lot of people now growing up in Ireland. Maybe they come from immigrant backgrounds, but they do have a dual identity if they're born in Ireland. And I think it is a strength. Whenever I travel to America or France and say I'm Nigerian Irish, they're like, oh, really, you're Irish? Like, what is that like? Like how, what is the culture there like, the food there like? Like they've a lot of times never met a Nigerian Irish person. And so or even like the way I speak, it's not with a Nigerian accent, for example. So when I go home to Nigeria, they're like, oh, you are so Irish, like you are such a Western girl. And so it's interesting, definitely, and I do love it. I've grown to love it.
Yeah. Just talking about diversity, equity and inclusion, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this topic with you, and you have addressed like some of the challenge that the entrepreneur were facing in Ireland, but more generally, you're aware that like between the time you probably take on and did your dissertation and maybe what has been happening now, things have been evolving or are evolving literally as we speak. You look at the likes of Google, Meta, the extent to which they have progressed on that agenda, being the first to publish diversity report, having even diversity target, to being amongst the first to drop the acronym DEI from their annual report. So the atmosphere is changing quite dramatically in the US, and it's also affecting Ireland. Like, what is your view on DEI as a tool to facilitate integration in the context of Ireland in particular? Do you have any view on that topic? And I will actually jump on your answer and maybe make my own contribution to the topic.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I do think that DEI plays a huge role in the kind of economic development of Ireland as a country. If we kind of take diversity specifically, we're specifically kind of talking about representation of different ethnicities, of different races, of different religions. And if we want Ireland to be a country that attracts more, let's say, business for people who are in business, attracts more investment, attracts more a stronger workforce. We need a country that celebrates the different people that are living here. And what that is to me is social cohesion. So that's really including and having everybody represented. And so I think if we want to develop a future that kind of our economy is being built up, that diversity is very important. And then if we kind of take the equity stance, I do believe that it's very important to recognize that people come from different starting points in life. There is a very big debate about kind of equity and equality, which one is better, which one is correct. And to be honest, I think it's contextual, I think it's situational, which would be the most effective. But I do think equity is very important because the reality is we don't all come from the same walks of life. Some people need more support than others. And what I would really like to emphasize that a lot of people have a misunderstanding about equity is that it's not that you're giving some people an extra push, you're giving some people extra support than others. It is simply giving people support so that they get to the same level as somebody else who maybe has not received that support, but they are at this certain level. So if we're just taking it visually, somebody starts here, somebody starts here. Equity is simply ensuring that both people are starting right here. And I think that's something that people should really try to understand, because a lot of times they think it's actually pushing somebody else above another person. So it is still about merit. It is still about having an ability. For example, if you're taking 2 job candidates, it is still that both candidates are still qualified to do the job, but just ensuring that they have the adequate support. And if we take inclusion, I think it's really about belonging. So if we just take the, like in corporations, for example, if you are having a lot of diversity focus groups or having a lot of research where you're directly asking people who are from ethnic minority groups, do you feel like your voice is heard in this organization? Do you feel like racial issues, maybe you faced microaggressions, do you feel like that has been solved, or do you feel like that has been overlooked? I think that that is really important in order for people to feel really included in the organization, because a lot of companies can just focus on quotas. Okay, let's just make sure we have 20% this, 20% this. But if you want to make real change and if you want to really make people feel like they belong in an organization, they need to have their voices heard. And not just at entry level. I believe that that should go to mid-level. I believe it should go to managers. And I do believe it should go to the C-suite as well. And this should, I do think that this would disperse out into kind of the overall Irish economy as well.
Yeah. No, I think you make a very valid point. Like you mentioned equity, and you're right. Like equity and equality are obviously completely different. But like there is a necessity to treat things different situation differently, and that relates to equity. But I think the big challenge, and I think it's an important point, because one of the reasons this DEI has been challenged in the US in particular was the around the quota and like the diversity target. So, and that's when it became like a more contentious issue, because I agree with you that like differences in starting point need to be addressed, and but the easy solution, if you want to address this, is like you define quota, and then, but that doesn't address actually the issue at the core. What it does is actually potentially create another type of inequality or injustice, which I think has been part of the underlying current as to why DEI policy in some company has been dropped so quickly. And I actually think, to build on that, the danger is now twofold. While those diversity and equity human resources are being dropped, it is important for the reason that I think I've allowed. Well, actually, let's face it, they are being dropped for political reason, but the political reason of the underlying, there's people who have voted for that particular candidate. But anyway, the point is, the danger would be that like the aim for social justice, or at least the aim for equity and for giving for giving equal opportunity. Actually, it's more than equal opportunity, for giving improved opportunity for people who are starting from a disadvantaged start point is at risk of being dropped as well. I think that's a real danger with what is happening, because you have like have an antagonizing view where the right is kind of saying DEI needs to be dropped and all the things that have been put with it, and then a left that seems to be saying no, DEI is fine as it is, and basically you're just a bunch of racist or whatever conservative people that whose concern don't need to be addressed. So I think we need to get out of this sterile almost confrontation around a topic that, as you pointed out, is about social inclusion, is about like building a more cohesive society. So
I think, to add to your point as well, from my research, I've really seen that a lot of people who are coming into companies don't actually want to be there simply because they are going to check a diversity box. They are more productive, they're going to be more engaged in the company if they know that they've been hired based on who they are, based on their merit, and based on what they've achieved, and based on their capability and what they can actually add to the company. It's kind of the same for myself. I wouldn't want to just be hired simply because I'm black and I'm going to make the company look more diverse. I'd want to be hired because of the knowledge I bring and the multicultural aspect that I bring, that I can also bring to business. So I think that's also one thing.
It'd be difficult for them to recognize. So as you pointed out, like, in the early 2000 or late 2000, there wasn't people from different ethnic or cultural minority in Kerry, but even in Dublin. And of course, like, the situation has changed quite dramatically over the last 20 years. So from a country that was, a net emigration, we are a country that now, is welcoming more than 50,000 net immigrants per annum, which is substantial. There is also, so that's one part, and that's a change, and a welcoming change. And then on the other part, something that is seldom talked about is the extent to which, like, people who are been in this country are actually very often subjected to micro harassment, racist abuse. I actually think it's underreported. I was quite shocked to talk to some of my colleagues in this school, and who are, can you try describe it? Ethnically visible. I don't know if that's a terminology that you can use.
Visibly ethnic.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, they've all said they've experienced something from micro harassment to something more serious, like bottles thrown at them when they walk near a bus station and stuff. And I don't think that's talked about too much in Irish society, which is normally perceived, as it is the case, as a very welcoming society. What's your take on those two aspects?
I think it's definitely a real issue. I think a lot of people don't actually talk about the microaggressions they face, the micro kind of abuse that they face. Why that is, I can speak for myself. For me, I have faced a lot of microaggressions in Dublin, to be honest, but it doesn't really come up in conversation. Sometimes it's a bit embarrassing to say that this person has just called me this because, I look a certain way. And the biggest reason I would say is because I don't think it would help. I don't know. If I talked about it with my friends, then I've already been called that name and it doesn't really solve anything. So I'm not as inclined to really tell people that it happened. But it is through conversations like this that people get to know that these things do happen, and they're very real and they're very hurtful, actually. So I do appreciate that you're asking this question. But yeah, in terms of myself, I have faced some verbal racial abuse in Dublin. Actually, a lot less in Kerry, a lot more here. There is a lot more immigration in Ireland, as you mentioned, and there's been a positive and negative reaction to that. Like, we've seen some kind of anti-immigration protests and just kind of general backlash at immigrant communities coming into Ireland. And I do understand that our country, there is a scarcity of some resources like housing, for example. So if you're going to be bringing a lot of new people into the country, is that not just going to exacerbate the issue and make it worse? Potentially, but we are all human at the end of the day. A lot of people who are coming into the country are fleeing from war, they're fleeing from a life that is not livable in that country, and we have the support, we have the resources, and we do have a lot of kind people that are willing to help immigrants in Ireland. So I think it's something we should celebrate when people are moving here, and it shouldn't be a case of verbally abusing them or making their experiences negative. And I think if we ultimately want to just develop Ireland's economy in terms of our sustainability, in terms of job development, in terms of housing, we can do that through diversity of people, because when you have diversity of people, you have diversity of thought, and new ideas can be developed, new projects, new businesses can be developed that can solve these kind of housing crises, solve maybe issues within the medical industry, etc. So I do think that we should be welcoming immigrants, we should be welcoming diversity, because of the wealth of knowledge that that brings that could ultimately help Ireland. We shouldn't really see it as a negative thing.
That we have a demographic crisis, and so then, like, you know, it's if in actual term it's being addressed through immigration, okay, and that's a reality. So you have like very different type of voices that contradict themselves into society nowadays. You've got the business community that says like we need more workforce for for employment or for the economic need of the country, be it in any Western society. So that's one line of argument. You've got like the humanitarian voice that actually say we need to welcome everyone or as many people as possible, because those people are coming from countries where there's war, there's difficulties, and we're all human and all of those things. There is also a growing part of the indigenous population that, aside from like the despicable racist abuse that we have described, are now moving into a voting pattern, and now not all of the people who vote for people who wants to stop immigration are racist, far from it, but they actually are saying, you know, resources are scarce. My own identity as a country, as an individual in my neighborhood is being threatened, not so much by one individual, but by the sheer number of people who are coming into the country. And I think there's very little debate about like what it means to address the needs of those various constituents, and what choices need to be made. So I do, my personal view, when you look at like 50,000 net immigration, that's like practically the size of Galway for Ireland. That's pretty impressive, you know, 50,000 in a country of 5.5 million. That's a big number. And so it's about like, I think it's about being reasonable about the level of people that are now going to be allowed to be coming into the country, and at the same time, like, so that we can actually have reasonable accommodation for properly integrating people into this society without fracturing it further. And that's a debate that I'm amazed, because that's a debate that actually concerns business, concerns society, concerns all of us. That I don't see it addressed anywhere, and I find it very strange. And of course, it's a difficult debate because, you know, your own personal history, my own personal history, our own background will lead to different view, and then the possibility of being caricature very quickly. But you know, so. So anyway, for me, that's one thing. But to come back to the topic that was of interest to us, I think for me the main thing is to look at like how do we address DEI with like all the people who are here, and then like as in a manner that is as inclusive as possible, with the idea of like reaching equality, but not enforcing, equality. And that's for me called for a new framework that probably needs to be adapted to Ireland or the EU and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, we've probably been talking for a good while. I was just wondering, when you reflect now on your on the way things have evolved for you, and you're now a Trinity alumni, and you were a finalist of the Business Student of the Year award last year. I think it's fair to say that if you're proud of having been accepted and then being part of Trinity, Trinity is extremely proud of having you as an alumni.
Thank you.
Award. A lot of people said that when they started in Trinity, they felt that they didn't belong, that because it's such a impressive, as in you feel impressed, like impressive institution to be part of, and I feel the same sometimes. I feel I don't necessarily belong. So what advice would you give people, like, so that they come to Trinity and feel welcome, or and succeed just like you did?
I think I'd give three pieces of advice. So the first piece of advice I'd give is kind of on that point, is understand that you do belong here regardless of where you come from. Honestly, the person sitting next to you is probably feeling the exact same imposter syndrome that you are. They probably feel that they don't belong here, that they didn't earn their place here. But honestly, you're starting at the same point. You're in the same courses, you're taking the same classes. Don't ever underestimate yourself or don't undermine your knowledge and your ability, because you are enough. And I think if you do come from a racial minority group or an ethnic minority group or a religious minority group, use that to your advantage. Something that I did a lot when I was in college was include it within my essays, include it within my papers, include being African within that, because I was the only African person in my course. And I knew that this is almost an advantage for me, because my paper cannot be the same as anybody else's here. My paper will stand out because I know that nobody else can write about the experience like I can. So I think know that you belong here and use your background to your advantage. The second piece of advice that I would give is to really take advantage of the network that Trinity can give you. There's so many different societies, there's so many groups and organizations, there's so many scholarships, there's so many travel opportunities. For example, the Laidlaw Leadership Scholarship, that was a scholarship that I got in second year of university, and that honestly has opened my mind so much, because I got to actually travel to the US and work. I got to volunteer there, and I was volunteering for a non-profit technology company that helped teenagers and children from underrepresented backgrounds learn how to use computers, learn how to code, learn how to build businesses, and learn about entrepreneurship. And these are things that they otherwise would not have got access to. And the only reason I got that experience was because I did my research when I was in Trinity. I saw this scholarship and I knew that this is something that feels so, that I feel so passionate about and I want to be a part of. And now as an alumni, I still have that network with the Laidlaw Foundation. And if anybody is into entrepreneurship, they also have a venture capital fund as well. So if you do want to start a business and you have taken advantage of the Laidlaw Scholarship, you do have a direct access to venture capital potentially. So that's also great. And the final piece of advice that I would give to Trinity students is to, I think, just really take advantage, just enjoy it, honestly. It does fly by, honestly. I know a lot of people say that. When I came into first year, a lot of people were like, your 4 years will fly by so quickly, they're gonna go before you even notice it, and they really, really have. I cannot believe I'm alumni now. Honestly, I remember moving into halls the first day, coming up with my parents and my brothers, packing all the stuff into my car, and just living away from home for the first time, living in a big city for the first time. but I've met so many incredible people over the 4 years, built such an incredible network, have really great job prospects, and even languages. I've been able to really improve my French, and well, what I think is improvement.
We haven't tried that.
Maybe later. So yeah, I think just enjoy the 4 years, travel, go on the trips, join societies. A big part of my experience in Trinity was my role with the Women's Network. I'm very passionate about female leadership as well as ethnic minority entrepreneurship. So that society was where I really got to express that passion and express my creativity for female leadership. So join societies and yeah, just take advantage of all the supports that Trinity has to offer, because it's such an amazing university. I can really see why it's in the top 100 in the world, and I think that any student who goes here is very lucky to be here and also deserves to be here.
Thank you. That's enough. Enough. Merci beaucoup, Ola.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
talking to you.
Thank you.